Good morning. This is Tim Selden and Rob Amos from Montessori Foundation on my part and Montessori Compass on Rob's part. And you are at a Montessori Foundation webinar on how to use the tool Montessori Compass for recording student progress, communicating with parents, and basically making your life as administrators and lead teachers easier. Rob, would you like to say anything to the group?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Rob Amos. I'm one of the co-founders of Montessori Compass, along with my wife Anita. Really appreciate everyone taking the time. This is our fifth webinar, the final one in this series, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about some of the ways that Montessori Compass can really help benefit school administrators.
I want to remind everyone that you're normally going to be on mute, so we won't be able to hear you. There are two things you can do to let us know what you're thinking or to ask questions. In the middle of the panel that's open up on your right side, there's a thing that says questions. It could be that on your screen, the little arrow that drops things down and makes it visible could be pointing at the word questions, in which case if you click it, it will drop down. There's also a thing at the bottom called chat. Notice that you can communicate directly to me or to Rob, and if you communicate to me, I will pass it on. If we're in the middle of something, there may be a delay before we get back to you, so please don't be frustrated. We try to respond to every single question you folks ask. This is indeed the fifth in the series, so those of you who have either participated live or have watched all 5 of the webinars that we are recording, by the way, right now, you have earned the equivalent of one continuing education unit, which is a United States educational program for in-service professional development of educators. So if you're interested in getting your continuing education unit, hopefully you're aware of the forms that are used. It was in your email invitation. But you've now gotten 10 hours worth of time, and you can earn one continuing education unit for what we've done so far. The last little piece of homework before we get started is we are about to repeat the series live, and I think in my last email at the bottom it gives you the dates and topics. I've not sent out an invitation yet, and I will send out invitations to each one as they approach. The idea in the next round will be to do 2 a week, and that will be the cycle until people are well into the year, because we're trying to help people who are implementing one of these systems for the first time to really come up to speed as quickly as you can. So today's topic is making Montessori Compass work for your school, the administration features. Rob, would you advance on to the next slide?
Absolutely.
So, as I think everyone knows, there's been a collaboration going on for the last couple of years between the Montessori Foundation and Montessori Compass. The Montessori Foundation is an umbrella Montessori organization founded in 1992 to serve the entire Montessori community of mostly Montessori schools, regardless of where your teachers are trained and regardless of any organizations you might be affiliated with. Our specialty is Montessori school administration. We call it leadership, and board governance, members of a board of directors, board of trustees, or ownership. We also have another side of our lives, which is reaching out to parents and trying to help parents to feel that Montessori makes sense. As you know, we publish Tomorrow's Child magazine. We have all sorts of webinars and courses for parents. I've written a number of books about parenting the Montessori way, and that's just another side of the Montessori Foundation's life. Montessori Foundation is not an owner of Montessori Compass. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Montessori Compass was founded by 2 incredible Montessori parents who also happen to be very talented educational leaders, and in Rob's case, a highly experienced programmer who developed the software with his colleagues around the world. to create this tool. We happened to stumble onto Montessori Compass early on. They approached us and asked us to take a look at it. I told them what I liked. I told them some things that I thought really needed to be improved. And I had been looking for some time as president of the foundation at this whole issue of how do Montessori teachers keep records? How does a school know what's going on in terms of children's learning? As an early advocate of the use of computer technology, I think we had one of the very first websites in the world for Montessori. That's why we have Montessori.org as our website. And as one of the first developers of online learning and various tools, we were quite interested in what could be done to make teachers' lives easier. There have been other players that have come along. Some of them have come and gone. Others continue to be out there and serve. And I want to be absolutely clear. Really, any tool can work. Paper and pencil can work. An Excel spreadsheet can work. Some of the other brands of Montessori software, they all work. What I appreciate about Montessori Compass is really a number of things, but one is it's easy to learn. Now, easy is a relative term because any new software takes an investment of time and energy until it makes sense to you and your teachers. But compared to anything that we've seen before, this is really simple. Secondly, Rob and Anita and their team created something that we feel is incredibly powerful. We can do stuff with this tool that we haven't seen other people be able to do. And so while many features overlap, regardless of which software you use, Montessori Compass, we feel, is really ahead of the pack by a couple of years. And it is the newest comer to the field. The third thing that I really appreciate about it is that Rob and Anita happened to ask if we would be willing to let them license our scope and sequence and build it in as a basic part of Montessori Compass. From the time we started that back in April, we've been feverishly adding to it because like any bright educators who look at almost anything Montessorians do, they look at it from a different perspective, and they started noticing things that we hadn't included, even after all the years, I mean literally 35 years of work that went into the scope and sequence the foundation produced. And so now what we would say is we are sharing custody. We have created together something yet again that is new and dramatically better than anything that we had before. And I really love what's come out of it. Not everyone's going to love it. I'm a great believer that nothing is right for everybody. But I can tell you that we use it ourselves. We recommend it without any hesitation. Now, what we're going to talk about today are the administrative aspects. Now, if you're a teacher listening in, please continue, because this will make sense to you too. But I'm going to put my leader of the school hat on, and if you're a trustee or a parent leader, this will also probably make sense to you. We have challenges in Montessori schools, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the features that are built into Montessori Compass that help address those challenges. Now, some of those are things that Rob and Anita had created before they ever talked to us. But over the last 2 years, kibitzing from the side, they have been very, very responsive to every suggestion we've made. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of money to re-engineer a car. It takes a lot of money to re-engineer computer software. And these guys may look like IBM, but they're a taco stand, would be the joke. You know, they're operating with some very, very sophisticated people around the world that work with them, but they're operating out of their house with 4 incredible Montessori kids. So I know as well as almost anybody that, you know, these are guys who are working day and night. They have really developed some neat features, though, and the best is yet to come. There's more that will develop as time goes by. But as it stands today, Montessori Compass addresses most of the things that are on my dream list. We're going to talk about some of the specific organizational features that are of particular value the school leaders and really the teachers and parent coordinators and volunteer teams, and all kinds of people within a school, trackers, tags, and various reports. We're going to talk about some of the monitoring features, how you can monitor individual student progress, how you can look at a glance at a classroom and see how does one classroom versus another classroom look in terms of keeping on track with reasonable hopes of what a Montessori child can learn. And by the way, I'm going to go into a real riff in a few minutes about the theory of how curriculum and progress and standards are kept in Montessori. We talked about record keeping and how would you distribute it. And we're going to talk about outgoing parent communication. So that's sort of the topics of our 2-hour session today. Now I'll take a breath. What are the challenges that we face with Montessori schools? Well, there's challenges that almost everybody shares who runs a school. Everyone's got to have organization. I mean, every single school, Montessori, Waldorf, public schools, private schools, large schools, little schools, you got to keep on top of organization. There's lots and lots of moving parts. You got to communicate with your staff. You got to communicate with your parents. But we also have some Montessori specific challenges. One of the challenges that we face, and I'll go into more about this in a minute, is that our schools tend to be archipelagos. We're independent islands of independent classrooms that are doing their own thing. And if you don't watch out for it, it's very easy for every teacher to have their own curriculum, every teacher to have their own record-keeping scheme, every teacher to have the things that he or she loves to do and likes to avoid, and it can be a problem. We also have the issue that in Montessori, we know kids learn in different ways. They learn at different paces. We don't move kids as a little herd across the prairie where, the animals that are running faster can be picked off by the wolves, and the animals that can't keep up, they get left behind and the wolves get them. In our model, we assume that children are always learning in their own pace. It doesn't mean we never work with groups. It doesn't mean you may not get a cluster that happen to run more or less at the same speed. But it's a lot harder for us than it is for a lot of schools, and yet every school, Montessori or any other kind of school, every school is interested in this issue. As long as I've been in education, which goes back now 45 years, I've been listening to school leaders write articles and give talks about the Holy Grail, the search for a way of managing individualized learning. And then the other big challenges for us is we don't rely on standardized tests. We may give them. We may give them and basically put the information in the file and ignore it, but we certainly aren't using test-based metrics as a tool for measuring student progress week to week, month to month, semester to semester, and year to year. Most schools do some version of that. You look at the typical master's and doctorate these days in school administration, they'll talk to you about data-driven, data-informed instruction. In Montessori, we don't have the equivalent of that right now. I'm going to suggest to you that's a problem. I'm not suggesting we ought to do what the other schools do, but it's not okay the way things are going. So why am I sitting here talking in collaboration with a for-profit company that I don't have any stock ownership in? The answer is, I care about you. I care about our schools. I believe our future's at stake. And I don't care if you're in Finland, I don't care if you're in South Africa, or in the UK, or in Japan, or in the United States, or in Canada. We're all facing some variation on that theme. Next slide. So, what do we need? Some of you have heard me say this before if you've attended my lectures or workshops or any of the courses that we teach on Montessori school leadership. Every Montessori school needs clarity, consistency, and integrity. Clarity is the key to success. Montessori schools typically look like a box of chocolates. And as Homer Gump, I'm forgetting the correct name of the movie, forgive me, Forrest Gump. As Forrest Gump's mom says, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get until you bite into it. That's the way it actually is for the average parent. They visit 3 Montessori schools looking for a new school for their child. It's pretty likely they're going to see 3 very different appearing schools. What they don't realize is that within the average school, if there's 2 or more classes, probably those 2 classes are very different from each other. Now, I've had lots of school administrators see that as an advantage. They'll talk about our teachers come from many different training backgrounds, and we learn from each other, and we collaborate, and we see it as an advantage. I could argue that too. I don't think that you have to hire from one training center to create a great program. The reality is most of us hire people from AMS, from AMI, from IMC, from MEPI. There's 15 major organizations just in the United States. And then there's many organizations such as LMC and St. Nicholas and MCI and Modern Montessori and so forth that are outside the United States, and that doesn't count the independent institutes that are found in every country of the world. Most of our schools get teachers who come from very, very different training backgrounds. But it isn't just that. It's that because somebody went through the same training course doesn't necessarily mean they're a carbon copy. They're very much their own people. They have their own experience. They have their own perspective. And yet a school needs clarity, consistency, and integrity. What do I mean by that? Well, first off, you're making a lot of statements in your brochure, on your website, in your advertising, during your open houses. You're describing a Montessori ideal. And parents get into our schools, and all too often they discover that the teachers may be doing something totally different. For example, one teacher may have a timeout chair, and another teacher doesn't believe in a timeout chair. Some teachers will say you can't go out for recess until you've done at least this much work on your work plan. Someone else may say, I don't believe in work plans. I'm not telling you, at least I'm not telling you today, what I think is right or wrong. I mean, who am I to tell you? I can talk to you about what Maria Montessori wrote, said, and did, and that still leaves enough variation for a Montessori scholar to debate about different practices. But I am going to suggest to you that great schools are made up of teachers and administrators who share a common vision, share a common understanding of how we do things here, and where what they promise is actually going on in the classrooms. And by the way, it doesn't fall apart and wash away when a teacher leaves the school because she falls on the ice and breaks her leg and someone new comes in. We don't get a brand new educational program. And that's too often what happens. Montessori is a big piece. The last couple of sessions I've shown you a tapestry image of what Montessori curriculum can be understood of. But if you close your eyes for a minute and just think about how big the curriculum is, it's like the threads of a tapestry. You've not only got practical life is made up of lots of pieces. We not only have twisting and carrying with balance and walking on the line heel to toe and walking through the classroom without banging into things and control of the body, control of the hand. We've got grace and courtesy. We've got care of our person. We've got responding to conflict and aggression from others. That's all practical life skills. all of the different things that are everyday living skills from infancy through high school and really beyond are part of the practical life. Sensorial is the same. It's much more than what you buy from the material manufacturers. It's knowing how to listen. It's the silence game. It's music appreciation. It's art appreciation. It's cooking. For us as adults, it's wine tasting. You're probably not doing a lot of wine tasting with your 3-year-olds. At least I hope you're not. But then there's architecture, and there's engineering, and there's science, and the story of famous people. And hopefully the famous people that you're introducing, your 3, 4, and 5s, and your 6 to 12s, and your 12 to 18-year-olds, are not just politicians and generals. They're people who made the world a better place. So while we give children the whole picture, and we don't just paint this rosy image, we certainly want them to know what the Berlin Wall was, and we want them to know who John F. Kennedy was, and Martin Luther King, and George Washington, and we want them to know about Mahatma Gandhi and who Maria Montessori was. We give them a lot of pieces in our curriculum. Our curriculum is so big, it's huge, and we don't have prepared textbooks that make it canned. And so we as Montessori educators and we as Montessori administrators, we have to have a way of getting our teachers to at least remember the important stuff, that they don't simply ignore major areas of the curriculum that they're not comfortable with or they're not familiar with. So classrooms tend to operate as their own individual entity. And this makes parents crazy. I know if Anita Amos was online, she would talk about what this felt like for her as a Montessori mom. I suspect Rob would be more than happy to talk about this as a Montessori dad. But I would suggest to you this is a big challenge for us as schools. We want parents to love us. We want parents to come to our parent education nights. We want them to appreciate us, to pay their tuition on time, to keep their children here for all 3 years of the early childhood cycle, to stay for elementary, to value what we're doing for their children. Half the secret of doing that is we have to have a plan that takes the disorder of a group of individual teachers doing their own thing and turns it into something that approaches harmony, a plan, something a parent can understand and feel comfortable and trusting in. For far too long, we've said to parents, you just have to trust in the Montessori way. It's going to lead your child to become just like Sergey Brin and Larry Page and Julia Child. Well, maybe it will and maybe it won't. It's not as simple as that. Just having the materials and having a piece of paper on the wall that says you are a Montessori educator doesn't mean that what you're doing is what Montessori had in mind, and it certainly doesn't mean that what you're doing is even remotely similar to what the teacher next door to you is doing. Schools are groups of teachers. They're usually made up of more than one classroom, and the experience for a parent should be remarkably consistent from classroom to classroom, from one level to the next, which, by the way, is not meant to suggest that the elementary program is the same as the 3 to 6-year-old program, or the 3 to 6 is the same as the toddler program. You know that Montessori changes to meet the changing personality and needs and learning style of children at each stage of development. And yet, there's lots of ways to run a school. There's lots of ways to organize. Whatever you're doing, whatever version of Montessori you're implementing, hopefully it's consistent from one end of your school to the next. And that's part of the message of today. Rob, next slide. So we would argue that your school needs to have clarity of vision. And you need to have some way of creating a pretty darn coherent, consistent program and practices from class to class, level to level, and year to the next. and you have to have integrity, which means deliver on your promise. Don't talk airy-fairy nonsense that you can't deliver. You got to walk your talk. You can't speak Montessori and talk about peace, love, and the Montessori way and treat parents like they're naughty children or children like they're naughty children. We have to have a way of doing it that's consistent with your vision of your school. Your school will ultimately come up with a personality. Unfortunately, every time the head of school leaves, typically a school goes into a convulsion. Now, sometimes that isn't the case because the teachers really become the bedrock of the school, and that can be good and that can be bad. Teachers can get ingrown. They can become very, very stuck in their ways. They can drift off Montessori and into something very different and not even realize it. Schools need to be constantly studying themselves, constantly evaluating themselves. And I don't mean evaluating simply in terms of our children on grade level. If it's not clear, let me make it clear. I really feel strongly, and the Montessori Foundation is very, very committed to this position. We resent government interference in education. We support parents' right to choose. And we support the idea that not all education needs to look the same. People learn in different ways, and schools ought to have a personality that's very distinct, not simply a knockoff of one school looking just like another. And yet your school should have a sense of who it is. You ought to have a sense of your traditions, your way of practicing Montessori. That school-wide culture should lead to essentially a handbook or a deeply understood and consistently followed set of ideas about this is how we do things at this school. By the way, Anita is saying you can't hear me. Can people give me some feedback? Rob, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you. It was garbling a little bit there, but it came back.
Good. Thank you, Lauren. I see you're online. I hope you're enjoying your summer. Shelley, thank you. Patty, Mark, wow, thank you, everyone. It's muffled. It sounds like I need to increase my volume a little bit. Rob, before I start off on the next riff, is my volume too low?
It's coming through loud and clear for me.
Okay. I just goosed it up a little bit. Tell me if it gets distorted, guys, and I'll keep going. So that's the idea, is that while your school and my school may be very different, I mean, some schools, for example, really, really welcome parent involvement. They see that as being critical. Other people really feel strongly that they prefer that parents let the Montessori teachers go about their business and let us do our thing without parents walking in the middle of class and saying, "Hi, boys and girls." However you run your school, it ought to be the same. It shouldn't be that one teacher is doing one thing and another teacher is doing something else. Okay, next slide. So now I want to talk for a minute about how to understand curriculum, because a big part of what we're doing today is not the individual record keeping part that we've talked about in lectures 1, 2, and 3, or even how we communicate it to parents. We did that actually it was in talk 3 and 4, where we talked about how to communicate with parents. Today I want to talk to you as school leaders, whether you're the head of a school or not, about how to think about curriculum and standards and expectations. So in conventional thinking, school is maybe a highway. This is a long, dusty road, but it's the idea that you walk down that road with your little bright, shiny lunchbox on your first day of nursery school, and you just keep walking towards the far horizon, and eventually you arrive at the day where you have achieved your results. and you don't have to anymore read a book or write an essay or do anything that has to do with school, right? No, no. But the idea is you only cover the ground once. And by the way, there are expectations. By 1 year into the journey, this is what you're supposed to know. This is what you're supposed to have covered. And as many teachers will put it to me, my job is not to know children. My job is to cover content. And you don't usually hear that in early childhood. You might not even hear that in the first grade or two. But increasingly, in the culture that's evolved in the United States, teachers pay, if not their jobs, schools' existence depends on test scores. And test scores essentially are attempting to measure what does a child know. And the whole theory is that this is what a child should know by a certain age level. And textbook companies are very focused on what children are supposed to know. And they present all the information that is supposedly going to lead the children to learn that. And of course, as we all know, for many students, especially as they get older, they remember it for the test and then they forget it until they think they're going to be tested again. Now, that's one way of looking at curriculum. It's not the Montessori way of looking at curriculum. So, would you go to the next slide? Montessori philosophy of curriculum is something like a spiral. The assumption here is everybody learns at their own pace. That doesn't mean we don't have a plan. We have a plan. It doesn't mean that there isn't any expectation. There are expectations. The question is, what do we do if a child doesn't live up to our expectations? Just yesterday, I had a really nice family come in to see me whose child is going into fourth grade, except he's not. Because on the day they gave the state exams here, this child did poorly, for whatever reason. Parents described in this test FOGA. So he's going to have to repeat the entire year. That is the opposite of what a Montessori school would do. We do all sorts of things. We may give the child what I call the gift of the fourth year. That means some kids are emotionally as well as academically not really ready to move up to the next level. And we try, I think I went dead there for just a second. We give them the gift of the fourth year, which is the idea that we're not holding them back a year and they're not having to repeat everything that they did the previous year, but we want them to have the time to continue to master the skills and the things that are done at one level, and the truth is you could do it at the next level. But the reason why we would give a child the gift of a fourth year is they're usually not emotionally and socially ready to move up to a group of children who are 3 years older. So what we're doing individual pacing. I'm going to, in a second, ask Rob to go to a slide that shows the 3 streams of curriculum, which is another way of looking at it. And there's, hello. By the way, the next slide ideally would have been the 3 streams, but did you ever get a chance to put that in, Rob?
Let me go find this one. Here we go.
Yeah. Long as we're on it, I may as well explain what I mean by that. So this is a way that I think of curriculum. The first is cultural literacy. And the idea is that there are 3 rivers, I show it as 3 blue arrows, coming together to form a larger stream. So in my mind, our programs, regardless of the age level, are made up of at least 3 parts. The first is the stuff that children need to know by a specific age level. Children, by the time they're in first grade, really ought to be potty trained. I think you would all agree with that. Probably have in mind that that might happen a little earlier, maybe by age 3. For a lot of our schools, that's the first expectation that we have. Rob, would you mute yourself? I'm hearing your breathing. Thanks. Um, so the cultural literacy is all the stuff that in your country or in your state you feel the kids really ought to know. And you can think of it in terms of year by year. You know that not every child's going to learn the same thing at the same pace, but there's some idea of what kids are going to learn. You could say, well, that's what's in our albums. I would say the albums are not really a very good plan, but whatever your source is, the first stream is all the stuff that you really aren't going to ultimately give a child a vote. You're going to entice, let me say that again more clearly, you're going to attempt to entice a child. You don't want to ram it down his throat. Your goal is to set their souls on fire, but ultimately you need for them to learn how to add. You need for them to learn their multiplication tables. You need for them to know what their friend, the dangling participle, is. There's lots of things, and that's not just reading and writing and arithmetic. That's things like what we were talking about before. What was the Berlin Wall? Who is Martin Luther King? What do we mean by a tautology? Lots of stuff that in your mind might be the building blocks of a culturally literate person. Now, under that, you'll notice three statements. Swim with the current. Well, what I mean by that is don't ever, as an educator, try to swim upstream against the current of the river because you're just going to get exhausted, if not drowned. So the idea, if you're trying to get across a river, is you never swim upstream, and you usually don't even want to swim straight across because you're going to get swept downstream. And so the thing you get taught in the Boy Scouts is you get in the river and you point it, you look at what's downstream, and you look at how fast the current is, and you swim downstream, cutting diagonally across the current and let the flow of the water move you along. The metaphor there is that in Montessori, we always follow the child. We always pursue the things they're interested in. We entice them if we can. We do everything we can to follow their interests, to honor their interests, to let their interests be part of what's going on. But ultimately, if the child is having a hard time, at the very least, you imagine a warning light suspended over the kid's head saying, danger, 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 something's wrong here. It could be the child has a learning challenge or an exceptionality. It could be that the child simply requires a different way of learning this than what you've tried so far. It could be that the child, God forbid, is placed in the wrong school. He may need the nuns. Whatever it is, we as schools have to be paying attention, and we have to have some kind of standards. The second area, or stream, are sowing seeds of wonder. Seeds of wonder are all the things we do that are meant to inspire. For some of you who know them, you're talking about things like the great lessons, the cosmic curriculum. I call them meta-narratives, the great and enduring topics in Montessori that are not just bread and butter. They're meant to get kids to see a big picture. For example, the idea of peace as opposed to war, and kindness as opposed to cruelty are good examples of the kinds of things we do in Montessori. So I'm suggesting to you that in your day, your week, your month, your year, your educational program needs to have an equal dose of the cultural literacy, the first stream, and the second stream, seeds of wonder, things that are designed to awaken kids' awareness, interest, taking them to art galleries. The Mommy It's a Renoir program that was developed years ago. Anything you do that gets kids excited, and that can be experience, it could be a field trip, it could be a guest speaker, it could be a play, it doesn't matter what it is, these are things that you're doing that the children don't have to learn, but you want to encourage them to learn. In other words, you're going to pay attention. You're the one initiating it. You're the one who's going to set the field trip to go to the mosque, to go to the Jewish synagogue. You're the one who's going to bring in the guest speaker. That doesn't mean the kids couldn't do it as well, but this second part is what you bring to the table as a Montessori guide or as a head of school, something you might be asking your teachers to do. Montessori described that as sowing seeds of culture. So I think of it as broadcasting wildflower seeds. We don't know which ones are going to germinate. We just know that it's incredibly important. And then the last one, which again, we all do it to some extent. The question is, do we do it in equal parts? And that's really what I'm trying to get at here, is work that comes absolutely out of the child. Now, I don't mean that you as a Montessori guide say to a child, what would you like to do a report about? Rather, what exactly is the child interested in? The child comes in excited about something, and you encourage that, and you allow him to pursue it and share it with his friends. Okay, Rob, would you go back to that previous slide? And D. Hirsch is saying, hey, can you move on into Montessori Compass? Thank you, D. So why do we have to have standards? Why do you have to monitor this stuff? Well, the answer is you can't ask parents to trust you. That's dangerous because that leads to failure to educate lawsuits. You have an obligation. You can be a Montessori school, but you have an obligation to do everything within your power to cause a child to be on grade level and to know if he's on grade level. And so the question is, how do you know that? Well, I would suggest to you that the worst way to do it is standardized testing. So I'll flip down to that and I'll say, okay, we're all at least challenged with the issue of standardized tests, maybe not at toddler. Lauren doesn't have to give a standardized test to her toddler toddler children at Newgate. On the other hand, there are such things as standardized tests, and most Montessori schools either do them, feel pressured to do them, or wish they didn't have to do them. I would suggest to you that at their best, they're very crude, dumb instruments. And one of the things that I'm hoping will come out of the work that we're beginning with Montessori Compass, the next big project, is to create an authentic way of standardized testing for Montessori that's profoundly different from the way standardized testing usually works now. So we're hoping within a year you'll be hearing from us about that. But in the meantime, you still have an obligation. And your obligation as administrators is to find a way to create a record of authentic assessment. It starts with observation. Montessori Compass is a tool for recording those observations and putting them in a way that they're either confidential or they're being shared with parents. But however you get them, you need to be getting very careful data, and it all starts with observation. The second thing is portfolios. You need to be keeping copies of children's work. Those are artifacts. They're data that shows evidence of what a child actually is doing and understands. And one of the ways to do that is to create a portfolio of paper. That's okay. Montessori schools for years have created little notebooks or yearbooks where children paste in examples of problems they've worked on. Video artifacts are yet another way. Recording a child at work and having that video named and put into a folder so that you've got video evidence. At least that's evidence that you can use if you ever needed it. it's the same thing as observations, but now we have more than just a couple of notes you put on an index card. You got something that you could actually show a parent. The idea is to come up with a holistic system, a tracking system that includes a lot of different pieces and that can be communicated in a way to parents that they actually understand it and trust it. And that ultimately is what we're trying to do. Next slide. Well, you can skip this one. So, Montessori Compass, it's a lot of things. One of the things it is it can serve as part of our eyes and ears as Montessori leaders. We can use Montessori Compass to monitor what the teachers are reporting as having happened in their classrooms. We can certainly monitor any of the public reports that they're preparing for the families because that becomes part of the child's records. And there's all kinds of other tasks that we do as administrators that Montessori Compass makes much easier to do. So we fiercely monitor our children. And by the way, this doesn't preclude the idea of going into the classrooms and sitting there and observing and meeting with teachers and coming up with continuing progress plans for their development. We're not suggesting that Montessori Compass or any tool replaces that, but rather that this is an invaluable tool that you can use from your office, and Rob will show you how in a little bit. Next. So how does this benefit us? Well, it helps us as administrators to figure out how to best support our teachers. We can see what's working and what's not working. And if we're communicating with parents, we're getting some transparency. Parents are seeing some evidence of what's going on, and we're all kind of on the same page. The parent may or may not understand what you send home. We do our best to make it as user-friendly as we can. But the goal is, at least if you're telling them, and you're not just telling them once or twice or 3 or 4 times a year in a conference, you're putting it in writing. That is the kind of reporting that the law typically expects to see and that parents definitely expect to see from their point of view as stakeholders, as parents in your school. And finally, if you're really monitoring this stuff and thinking about it, you have the ability to spot trends and trouble quickly, and you have the ability to do something about it. Next. So, Rob, I'm going to let you pick up here. This is really an outline of your key discussion points for the next part of the seminar.
All right, Tim, thanks for that. We're going to go over and talk about some of the ways that Montessori Compass can be customized and used to benefit a variety of school administration needs. First off, what Montessori Compass is at its core is a record-keeping solution. Our philosophy is that everything meaningful really begins in the classroom, and that the various other features that we have, whether they be administrative or parent communication or anything else, really is kind of built upon what happens with the teacher and the student inside a classroom. So that's where our core focus has been and where it continues to be, and we're always evolving and continuing to build features on top of that. We do offer quite a bit now, and we continue to develop more. We have a lot of really exciting plans in the months ahead. We get asked a lot about, does our system do this or that for different administrative needs? And while we'll never be a fully featured school management software, there's a number of them out there that focus on, various day-to-day things about running a school. They're not necessarily Montessori specific, but there's some very robust school management softwares out there. We provide what I would term a lightweight school management type of features in here that can be customized and can work the way that you need them to work. So we're going to go through and talk about some of these here today and show how you might be able to use them. So let's start with the trackers, something that we've talked about before. And it really kind of puts in practice our philosophy that there's no two schools that are exactly the same, and there's no kind of one-size-fits-all approach to running your school. We really believe that our software should really adapt to the way that you run your school, not the other way around. You shouldn't have to change the way that you're already doing things to to kind of work within our software here. So how would a school administrator utilize trackers? Trackers are a customizable feature that you can basically keep track of anything you possibly could ever think of. It's really only limited by one's imagination. A school administrator is going to need to keep track of all types of paperwork and so forth, and permission slips, and meals, and things inside the classroom, particularly the younger classroom, naps and diaper changes and things like that. Here's just a couple of samples. The way this works is you go ahead and you create a category here. We'll call this one paperwork. You have a choice whether or not you wish to share this with parents or to not share this with parents. So you decide right there what you would like to do. Now your category is created. We have 0 trackers in here. Now I just start creating trackers here. I'm not feeling very creative today, so we're just going to call this paperwork 1 here, and then I can decide which cycle years at my school is this relevant in. The software is designed to go from infant through 12th grade, and it'll only show the cycle years at your school. My demo school has all of them in it. So if this is something that is relevant to everybody, maybe it's an enrollment form or a medical form or whatever the case is, I can just go ahead and choose all, and then it'll be available in all of the classrooms. Let's go ahead and create that one, and let's go ahead and create another one. This next paperwork is going to only be for my upper elementary classroom, so I'm going to tag this to 4, 5, and 6. All right, and we're going to create that one. So now we have 2 different trackers here underneath this category. You notice this is not shared with parents. This is completely private. Now, what would I do when I want to start tracking this? I would go into my daily dashboard. We've talked about this in great detail. This is really the central hub of the site where all the action takes place throughout the day. And I click on the Trackers tab, and I'm in a primary classroom right now, and you'll see all of the different trackers that are associated with this particular classroom. Now, you might have a half dozen trackers, you might have 100 trackers, so you make it really easy to narrow it down whatever you're looking for. If you remember that one I just created called Paperwork 1, I type in the word paper, and you see it's filtering that list based on anything that contains the word paper in it. So now I'm going to go ahead and select that, and let's say that Maria and William and Wendy all turn this particular piece of paper in. Now they have been tracked for that. Now let's go back to trackers again, and I'm going to choose it again. And now I can see very easily that, who has turned it in and who hasn't. So I can see that Maria's turned it in, William and Wendy, because we already have the check marks there. And let's say now John and Dylan have turned it in as well. So now they're added to the list. So that's how I might go ahead and utilize that. If I toggle into my upper L classroom, remember I tagged one specifically for them. So now I type in paperwork. Now I see paperwork 1 and paperwork 2. So that paperwork 2 was tagged only to the 4, 5, and 6 cycle year. So it's available in upper L, but it was not available in any of my other classrooms. So going back to my trackers, again, you can create any categories you would like. There's no limitation to this, as many individual trackers as you would like. Now, if I decide that I'm done, I no longer need this, or I want to make changes, I want to call this, something different here. I can change the name of it. I can choose to start sharing this with parents if I would like. I can make whatever edits I would like. If I want to edit the individual tracker name, so instead of paperwork 1, it's paperwork A. If I want to change the cycle years, just like with our record keeping, it's very nimble. I can make changes at any time to anything on here. And I can continue to add these within the category. Let's go take a look at the tracker report. Let me show you some of the other areas where you can monitor your tracker. So I'm going to click on reports. We're going to spend some time talking about a variety of these reports in here, but we're specifically talking about trackers right now. Go down to my trackers, and now I have filters based on the classrooms. I can look at all classrooms or go into a specific classroom. We'll stick with all classrooms, and let's go down to, say, enrollment forms, where we might have some demo data here. So here's all my different enrollment forms here. The text is kind of running together because of just the real estate on the screen here. But you get the idea. There's an emergency contact form and a health assessment and medical release and so forth. And I can see checked, who has done it and who has not. So I can see that Maria, she's turned everything in. Carly has only turned in a couple of them, and so forth. I have the option to print this out. Anytime you see print in the site, it'll go ahead and convert what you see here on the web to a downloadable PDF that you can either print or download. And then you also have an option to download as the CSV, which is a nice way of doing it as well because it'll display it on a spreadsheet and it's actually pretty easy to read the trackers. If it's something that gets tracked multiple times, then it'll give you a number. So if it's something like paperwork, enrollment forms, things like that, those are things you're probably going to track once. There's one medical form or there's one emergency contact form and it's either tracked or it's not. For things that are recurring events like diaper changes and naps and meals and volunteer hours and things like that, you can go ahead and it'll give you a number. So if there was 10 diaper changes, it'll have 10 next to it. So that's how that would work for multiple things that are tracked multiple times. I could also go into my student's profile and let me go ahead and we'll choose Maria. And we're going to go into her, there's a More tab here. As I scroll across, you'll see there's more items that you can look at for Maria. So we're going to click on Trackers. And I can see here's that category that we just created called Paperwork. I can see we went ahead and we tracked her for that particular thing today. And I can make changes at the individual student level if I would like. I can click Edit, and I can go ahead and change the date on this if I would like, or I could add a comment. I could also go ahead and delete this, and then this tracker is now removed from her. And I can, of course, print out trackers as well, so we can toggle between these. We'll go to something that has some data in it, the enrollment forms. And I can see very clearly that she's turned in the health assessment and the student app and the tuition agreement and so forth. And again, edit and delete, make whatever changes I would like. I can see here's the form that she did not turn in, this medical release form. So any type of paperwork, enrollment type forms, anything, permission slips, anything you can possibly think of that you wish to keep track of, this is a really good solution for that purpose. So then there's the two different ways actually three different ways of monitoring who has been tracked for a specific thing, whether it's in the daily dashboard, whether it's in the reports in the backpack to see everybody at a glance, or in the individual student's profile. The next thing I want to talk about are the student tags. And again, student tags is really a nice example of the philosophy that, there's no one-size-fits-all approach as well. We recognize that schools need to keep group students together based on a variety of different types of criteria. And so instead of going ahead and putting all these different types of fields inside a student's profile, where the software really at that point just gets too big and bloated and difficult to use and cumbersome, that's never been our goal. We've always wanted it to be very lean and nimble and easy to use as possible. So just as the trackers gives you things you can keep track of that are important to you, tags gives you different types of criteria where you can group students together. Maybe we need to keep track of things like ethnicity or religion or any sort of marketing or administrative type things like, who are the students that are the result of a certain Google ad or a newspaper ad, or, I want to post some photos up on my school's Facebook page or my school's blog. Who's filled out the photo release form? Who participates in the pizza lunch? Which students have re-enrolled for next year? Tuition, who pays annual, who pays monthly, who's completed all their volunteer hours. Whatever the case is, you go ahead and you create a tag, and then you can go ahead and tag to the individual users. So let's say we want to go ahead and create a tag here. We'll just call this test tag. I click create. And now we have our test tag here. And this has been applied to Maria. I'm in Maria's profile now. So let's go down and we'll say, let's go down to Raphael. And I'm going to go ahead and add this tag to Raphael. Now it's been added to him. And let's go down to Declan. And we'll add it to him. And we'll just choose one more. We'll choose Lily here. And we'll go down and add it to Lily. So now this tag has been added to those 4 students. So now I'm going to go to my main students list. We're showing all students in our whole school here. Our school contains 42 students. Now, as your school gets bigger and bigger, we work with schools that have just a handful of students. We have other schools that have, 3, 4, 500 students. So, it can be really difficult to kind of make heads or tails out of everyone and try to figure out, who's who and all the different types of criteria. So we really try to make it easy for administrators to keep track of this information. If I want to filter my students based on a criteria, I can go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and just choose that test tag that I did. We choose test tag, and now we've went ahead and we've narrowed it down to 4 students. So out of my 42 students, now I'm only displaying 4 students. I have the option to go ahead and print this out if I would like. Again, anytime you see print, it'll go ahead and turn it into a downloadable PDF. So here's my classroom roster for those students. I can also print their contact information if I would like, if I need to know who their parents are and so forth. This is a demo site. Maria's the only one that has anything in here. And then I can also download as a CSV file. A CSV can be opened up as a spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel, any other spreadsheet app you may be using. And then you can do further manipulations to it. So by downloading as a spreadsheet, if you need to run a custom report based on any of these tags, you can go ahead and do so. So it makes it, really easy to do. So instead of putting all these things in here we would never be able to think of every single thing you can possibly want to keep track of. So by giving you the flexibility to either use the trackers or the tags, we really feel like that fills a lot of the gap, as far as the administrative type needs that you may have. So moving forward, let's take a look at some of the other things that you can go ahead and keep track of that would probably be useful to administrators. Going back into Maria's profile here. And Tim, I'm moving on to a new topic. I'm not sure if you want to go ahead and take a break first or do some questions or something.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I had myself muted. Why don't we just stretch because we've been going now for about an hour. And I would suggest we just take a moment or two. I don't have any polls ready for you this week. So what I'm going to do instead is invite you while we're taking a 5-minute break. If you've got any questions, just shoot them off, and Rob and I will try to answer them. And I saw one that was asked. Rob, did you see it? The one about if we share trackers with parents, will they be able to see the comments for all the children or only their child?
Yeah, if you share trackers with a parent, they're able to see that on what we call our activity report, whether that be a daily or a weekly activity report. And it's important to note throughout the entire site, whatever it is, a parent would only see information that's related to their child. So they're never going to see anything related to anybody else.
Great. At the moment, the only other thing I see is that D. Hirsch points out that your volume is a little low now.
Okay. Well, I'm using my shiny new headset here,